Man, I can't believe it's Friday. What's up, Chris, Matt? How you guys doing?
We are here. We made it.
We
Yeah,
made it.
it's been a rough ride, but survival has been achieved.
Congratulations.
Yes. Now, I believe Joe was just talking about how much he loves pie charts right before we started.
He was. I think, I was saying that my favorite chart of choice was a radar graph one. So
do you identify as a radar graph? Is that what you're getting at?
No. I definitely more of a stacked bar graph. I think would be how I identify if I was gonna identify as a particular graph.
How about you, Matt? What would you? What kind of graph is your spirit animal?
Oh man, I mean, probably like some kind of polar graph or something from teaching calculus. Like you got your carotid graphs and stuff. You remember these things from calculus back?
I do. Yeah.
Probably something like that.
I thought you were more of a heat map man myself, but yeah, I read you wrong.
Yeah, but why is pie charts a Python library? Because it should be, clearly. Like there should be something called pie charts.
Should be called pie chart.
Right, exactly. Yeah, more pies the better in Python.
Yeah, so today we're got the crew back together for this week's edition of Let's Talk Data Engineering. But Chris thought it'd be a great idea for us to talk about data storytelling instead. So that's what we're going to do. You got data engineers and data architects who are arguably going to be getting out of our lane a bit and talking about data storytelling. So let's do this. Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, well, I think we'll just give it from our view of where we've seen it in our we're not going to call ourselves, the storytellers of data. And there's better people out there written books on it, and we haven't. So I think it was. I was thinking about this week. What do I actually do mainly in my job recently, and some of the clients, and I'm thinking the architecture and engineering and best practice part has become a little bit less with some recent activities. And I ended up being a bit of a storyteller. It was like, okay, so I knew what I wanted to do. I mean, the team knew what we need to achieve. We're a high impact team that know what foundations are needed for most scenarios in most projects. But to get those things either agreed or on a roadmap or recognized, you need a story to go with it. And just saying, I need it, my engineers want it, it's great, it's going to help everything. But is it really? What's it going to help with? How do you get there? Why should I even buy into it? And so I spent the past that time I spent a few weeks of just trying to work out how I get what I need to get dumbed down at the correct level, at the right story, at the right bite-sized chunks that can show, okay, this is why we're doing it. This is the impact of not doing it. This is the benefit of doing it. These are things I need to do to get there. These are things that are stopping me getting there. And then say, okay, well, that's this piece, and then this is the next piece. And what I struggled with was how I portrayed that in an easy way to people to understand. And before, going back to quite a few years, when I used to do my great architectural accurate, the lines never crossed, but they always went between the different layers and the different paths they're going. And I used to give it to my boss at the time, was the CTO, and I said, "You go, look, great. This is our platform." And I've made it a bit more detailed than it was. It wasn't that. But he just rip it apart, give 3 boxes. I said, no, but it doesn't quite. Just don't worry about that. And I realized after a while it's the right information at the right level for the right audience, and that's an art. And everyone needs that. Data engineers, data architects, your data strategy people, anyone involved, the data product owner as well. Any of those people need to be able to tell the story that's needed for their immediate audience or their stakeholders they have to engage with. So that's where the idea came from.
And I wonder, because data storytelling is often used for things like very specific presentations of data and charts and reports and such, I wonder if we're talking about like architecture storytelling or engineering storytelling or something like this, where you are the engineer, but your goal is to simplify this really complex diagram to say, this is what you as the CTO need to know, or probably the CEO more likely, right? What's the point of this project? What are we doing? Here are the 4 boxes. Let's put those together.
Yeah, and I think having that that different ability. So, for example, that one needs to that he also may need to speak to the guy that's created the pipeline. Then, well, this isn't quite what I'm doing. Well, this isn't quite how I envisioned it. Oh, let me have a look at it. Okay, right. I need to merge these things here. I need to do a transform. Okay, I understand now what's needed to be done. But it's having the right story at the right level of detail for who you're communicating to. And the CEO is not going to want to know about if you're doing an SCD dimension to go and get point in time and what SC you don't. But the developer may want to understand, and that's the language they would understand what you're talking about.
Why do you think technical people tend to suck really badly at communicating to non-technical people?
I think it's just where your strengths are and what you're best at. So I could code. I was never the best coder, but I could talk a lot more. So it was a little bit more natural for me I could understand enough. I could do it. Not to probably at one point I was probably quite good at it, but it was knowing where my strengths were, and my strengths were getting decisions made and getting it going in the right direction from what I did understand of how technically to solve something. So. And I think people that are more, I've got some great people in the team, but so some of them just left me alone in code. I mean, just give me the requirement. I don't want to go to all the stupid meetings about it. I just let me get on with it. And they probably don't want to go and argue to why they should do something when it's obvious to them. It's like, I've always done it like that. Well, why do I need to go and justify this to this other department now that's questioning it? And that's where I pick up those challenges, or I take them off. I enjoy them anyway. So I'll take that to go and get those things made. But there's a skill needed for that, and it's not just for that C level telling it the board and presenting it. It's for every different level. And I think what you can get from that storytelling of those different pieces, you get to what I'm referring to is you get to know what the right level is to the right audience and at the right time as well. You don't want to give too much detail right at the beginning. You want to show it in steps of how you get there, because nothing's achievable very quickly nowadays.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, the data storytelling that I'm familiar with, now if you read the books from like Brent Dykes or even Scott Taylor, both have wonderful books, by the way. Shout out to those guys. It's really about taking data and providing a compelling set of visualizations and explanations around the data, and really telling a compelling why about the data you're presenting. I think, and it's interesting because at the end of the day, what we're all doing is we're trying to do marketing and sales, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so. That's because when I read about it, and I first started reading about data storytelling and reading these books, I thought, okay, so really what you're telling us to do is, I think there's definitely some tactics that are specific to data in terms of the types of visualizations you would use. But at the end of the day, it really does come back to just basic communication, sales, and I would say persuasion techniques as well as persuasion techniques. If you don't know what persuasion is, you should read Robert Cialdini's book, Persuasion, where he kind of sets a table for, kind of basically it's the persuasion before persuasion happens. Yeah. But take a step back. I mean, that's kind of what we're all talking about, really. Is like, how do you more effectively sell your idea? Yeah. Across an organization.
And I think it's a term I like. It's reduce friction. So it's all about reducing friction of getting your idea to life, getting your getting that product vision to life, getting that business value to life, and whatever story or barriers you are able to break down by using those stories and getting that communication. I always go back to that community thing. So that community thing is a platform for all levels of storytelling to the different parts of that community. So and having go back to our observatory thing, having that available to help with that storytelling, to aid that storytelling, helps build that community and helps with that clear understanding. So I think you're perfect. I mean, I was very much looking when I was talking about the data story, it was that inward view of the storytelling of how you get inward marketing or reduction of friction for your delivery, or your realization of your data strategy or your data vision. But you're right, you're probably using some of those techniques that would have been in what we call the traditional storytelling of, what visualization you use, and where we started the conversation of what's your visualization chart of choices, and what you go in there. So, okay, do you think it's better to force the interpretation? So, I think it's to force the interpretation. I think you need to set the story or give the context of any visualization, because a visualization on its own, without a clear understanding,
well, there's a second part here too. Sorry, because it's like is it better to what? There's one option. The other option is, or give raw data to the top audience and build storytelling with them with possible unexpected outcomes. So this would be a fun one. I want everyone's opinion on these.
Yeah, I think there's two schools of thoughts on this one, and you do need. So there's some things you cannot find unless you do that data wrangling or go and use that raw data. So I do support in most cases, teams having access to that for a control purpose. What I don't support is that data then having things built on it without there being maybe proper cleansing happening on it, proper validation of it, proper validation of the source of it. That needs to fall back in. And I think if you're using a good data ops approach and you have someone doing that profiling or doing that analysis of that raw data, is as long as whatever they find, the insight or validation, gets fed back through in from that innovation pipeline to that BAU pipeline to start to build that as enterprise assets that not only your data science team can actually benefit from, but the whole enterprise can benefit from, and then continue that. So that becomes your pre-factory to your data pipelines to help that. Great question, though.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's interesting because I think this is, we often talk about giving raw data to business users. I think there are certain dangers to that, even if the data is properly cleansed. And when I say business users, I mean people maybe who can run SQL, but don't actually have analytic skills to understand what the data is. It does seem like you do. That's the reason why we have analysts in the first place. So they can take data, they know what the potential data problems are, they know how the business metrics are defined, and so hopefully they can come up with an accurate answer, an answer that's actually representative of what's going on inside the business. Versus if someone doesn't have those skills to understand the structure of the data, they could get some pretty weird results in some cases.
Yeah, so I had to go to my bookshelf real quick and get this is classic here, How to Lie with Statistics.
Yep.
Probably one of the best books of data storytelling, and also how to detect BS when people are presenting stories to you. So I think back to this first question here, force the interpretation, visualization of data to support the decision you need.
Yeah.
Who's you in this case? So this is kind of where I think this chapter 9, it talks about how to what they call statisticulate or manipulate with statistics or charts. I would say if you're going to data storytell, do it to a data literate audience, unless you have an agenda. If you want to misinform people on purpose, what better audience to do this for, right? Or to do this to. And so I think it really depends on the type of culture you have at your company, of whether people are using visualizations in a haphazard way, which this book again does a fine job at illustrating. Be careful of things like y-axis manipulation, where charts make numbers seem a lot more drastic than they should be, or simply don't have a label on the x-axis or y-axis at all. That's one way. So I would say you need to be really cautious of this. Actually, we used to work at a company where one of the heads of the company actually he didn't let people use charts.
Interesting.
Because he himself had known how data could be manipulated. So he's like, I want the raw data and I'm going to look at that. So I tend to agree with what you're saying, Chris, where if you're going to provide visualizations, provide the raw data along with it so we can do our own analysis. This assumes you have a data literate audience, but I think that companies should be building data literacy within their organizations. You avoid this at your detriment, really. But again, books like this, I would say, are a must read for people who are consuming data as well as producing data.
Or
There's a lot of
manipulation. Lie. Yeah, or want to learn to lie to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you, in this case, is the tobacco industry, basically. Isn't that what that book is supposed to be based on? Like his experiences working for the tobacco industry?
Yeah, among other, and just deceptive advertising, the whole thing. Right. Yeah, it's he says, someone says here, being a reader of How to Lie Statistics too, and yes, I'm generally the guy with the agenda in the room. At least you're honest. So here's the deal: everyone's got an agenda. Mm-hmm. Right? By definition, when you're talking about storytelling, you have an agenda. You're trying to tell a story, right? But here's the deal: people respond to stories. That's how human brains work. You don't respond to facts, actually, but you respond to how facts are told to you through a story.
Yeah, exactly. It's something, unfortunately, we've seen recently with broadcast of situations of corona around the world is mm-hmm. how the story is told, and without the context of how each measurement was being made, you can't actually measure it. But even though they were, so context and credibility of any data sets is really really important. And I think this is where I misunderstood maybe what the question is, like access to raw data. So I was referring to giving access to the data scientists to raw data to find stuff, and that's what I'm referring to. But anything that you publish or present, you need to be able to prove it. Otherwise, it's just architecture. And something I've been accused of in the past with recent with past diagrams. I mean, it's nothing. It's just architecture. You're just telling me you got a nice pretty picture of the platform, and this is. And you have you speak, you can get called out, and if you haven't got it, no, look, this is the facts or the story behind this nice pretty picture, and this is not just fictitious stuff, which is something that I've recently been focusing on for something, to make sure that we want this money to do this, we think it can add this value. Here and here you go. Here's the high level stuff. Oh yeah, what's it made up of? Okay, look, I can give you the whole story now of why you need to do it, when you need to do it, and if you don't, this is the impact of doing it. And
so are you saying that there's going to be like a sequel to this book called How to Lie with diagramming tools or something? Like,
yeah, it's the Miro edition. It's the Miro edition. Yeah.
I mean, one concern I have is that I see some actual negative evolution happening in the space right now. And I see this as a convergence of several things. So you have really nice diagramming tools like Lucidchart. Love Lucidchart, but you can really abuse it. You have the cloud, and you have something that one of my friends coined as logo soup. In other words, you get these diagrams that are very busy, so not good communication, and they aren't technically accurate. And they have a million logos, and they have a bunch of lines between them. And so they're just bad on every possible front. Grossly misleading, don't accomplish the job at all.
No. But it makes it look pretty when you do the presentation, flash it up.
Right, like, oh, I'm using 100 products. See all these logos.
It reminds me of that's something about Mary scene where he picks up the hitchhiker, and they're talking about 7-minute abs and 6-minute abs. I don't know if you remember that scene. It's pretty funny. Anyway.
Should I go watch that this weekend? I've never seen it, Joe.
Yeah, you should actually.
This happens all the time. Joe's like, remember this movie? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen it.
Remember this movie Star? No, I've never seen Star Wars before. It's
yeah. That's never seen it.
I think that brings up an interesting point, because data storytelling, I think in the traditional sense, it's all been about visualizations and how to take data and present it to stakeholders in a way that is digestible. But I think you raised an interesting point where there's other types of storytelling that occurs within data as well, right?
Yeah,
you're talking about architecture storytelling.
Exactly.
And this occurs a lot, I would say, between members on a data team too. Like, this is actually really important to get across, because we're not just talking about making cute graphs, but telling the story about architecture, about frameworks, about engineering. This is equally important, because if you can't get your colleagues on board, right, to even build a thing, then sure in the hell aren't going to be able to sell it to the rest of the organization very well. So,
yeah, I think it's to help with that. It's all about that crowdsourcing that information as well. Is to tell that story, to get the right story to be told, you need to talk to enough people to make sure the story you're telling is the right story. So it's that validation piece, and I think something that I found from delivering data strategies on large organizations is you need to work collectively to achieve these things. So that the more crowdsourcing, the more collaboration you do, the more buy-in you get, the more when that story gets broadcast or gets told, is the more buy-in you've got from it. Because you talked about there's that thing I asked for. Oh, that's cool. So they see where their piece fits into it, and they see that that's going for that greater good or the bit where you want to achieve, where you want to get to.
Sorry, I need to fix my.
Keep changing your views.
Another old reference. It's kind of Max Headroom from the 80s. That's what Joe was doing just now. Oh, now his voice is gone. I'm expecting the robot.
Sorry, my camera's been on the fritz all day here, so
okay.
I don't know what's going on here. Yeah, sucks. Anyway, that's what you get when you buy an expensive camera. It doesn't work. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I think actually Guy Thompson brings up a good point, which I want to talk about, because I talked about this with other data storytellers, misleading statistics and graphs, in the news all the time. It's interesting right now, I think, for storytelling in general, because we're dealing with almost a post-truth world in a lot of ways. And my question to Brent Dykes was, okay, so, you're going to tell a story with data, but I guess in a post-truth world, whose facts, whose stories are you trying to tell at this point, right? It seems like people can't even agree. They can look at a clock and not even agree on the time right now. And so I don't know if this starts extending to organizations at some point, but I know in society, it's like a huge, huge issue right now. Like facts don't seem to matter anymore because there's 2 sets, 3 sets, 4 sets of facts, or infinite sets. And like, which ones? I mean, so I want your views on this. I mean, in kind of in this context, this sort of the reality we're in right now, where does, how do you tell stories with data?
Yeah, because this is a huge issue, right? It's not just data, it's like basic statistical literacy. It's, in some cases, we have this issue now where more and more data is just publicly exposed, right? You can look up voting data, you can look up COVID vaccine data, and you have people going into the vaccine data and see, look, all the people who died after they got the vaccine, not understanding basic statistical causality, like very, very basic things. So to your point, Joe, you have multiple sets of facts, and then even when people do look at data, they have no idea how to interpret it from a statistical standpoint, which is a big issue.
But how would you teach that, though, right? I mean, stats is even basic statistical literacy is not easy.
There's 2 things. I mean, you're right. There's the education piece, but there's a trust piece, because until you've got the trust of what data they're seeing, they'll go to some alternative social media thing called Truth, maybe.
Yeah.
You'll go on to Donald Trump's new social media, Truth, to find out the truth, which won't match the real truth that you've just got from there. So now you're conflicted. So I think that's the first thing you got to do is get that credibility of that data, that this is approved by the Federal Facts Association or whoever they are, and get that. But the next one, as you point out, is the education piece. So and there's the younger generation. Obviously, that could be more of a thing that's put on the curriculum. Getting different audiences to get into that. I mean, that's something for the government or politicians to sort out.
And all kinds of policymakers. One example I throw out a lot is that in the last 20 years, so 20 years ago, pre-med students were not required to take calculus. Now they are. So they've thrown in another math requirement, but they're still not required to take stats. And the other big concern I have with the way we teach statistics in college is that, and I say this as a math person who taught lots and lots of proofs, if you take a stats class, it's like all these statistical proofs that the students don't understand, or at least the general body of students don't understand. and they just get very confused by it, and they don't understand the actual statistics. So we're not teaching statistics enough, and when we do teach it, it's like very arcane and not kind of pragmatic statistics.
For sure.
So do you think that's the stale curriculum that's there that hasn't moved with the times and giving? Because at the time those things were written, people didn't have access to like data sets that are out there, didn't have use cases they could go and play with real time. And that if they made that more look, and I suppose they're moving into more computer science stuff, but with system data science tools or something like that, give that into the hands of someone that's learning statistics. Oh, I understand it now. Okay, right now. Let me work out what that just worked out for me and how it did it. And it's a real use case with real value and helping them work out how it actually it was achieved, rather than it just being an answer in the back of the book. Okay, I checked it. Oh, I've got it wrong again. So I think that's something that needs to be probably addressed. But
yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I do feel like there needs to be just more open communication between professionals and academia. I feel like that's a significant problem. And so Joe and I actually created this like advanced SQL class for the University of Utah for exactly this reason. I actually got a friend, I'll tell you about this later, Joe, but I got a call from a friend of mine last night who's an attorney, and she's like, why don't we come up with an ethics of data science course together, and I can do the legal and you guys can do the data stuff. And I think data scientists in the stats space need to be doing the same thing, not just teaching stats through code camps, but like communicating with universities and saying, let's rethink how we're communicating to these students. We'll help you do it, and then we'll let you own it. Like, we're not trying to take your professors' jobs away, but we do want to rethink how we're presenting this information from a more practical perspective, having worked in the field.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. We can talk about ethics in a second, but Pierre also has a very interesting observation. I'd love you guys' take on this because I've seen this before. He says on the opposite, sometimes I come in a room full of distrustful stakeholders that would spend so much time asking me about the preparation steps I did to make this data visualization that I wish I had another data visualization to explain how I did this data visualization. Totally been there before. I call this bike shedding. I don't really call it that, actually. It's called bike shedding. What this means is you're going to focus on trivial, meaningless stuff at the expense of trying to get to arrive at any meaningful point. So
is that normally with stakeholders that don't agree with what's presented because it puts them in a bad picture?
Yeah, Pierre, you can follow up on that question. I think that's a good one. What's the motive behind them doing this?
Yeah. So
the motive I've seen when this happens is it's basically people want to make you look stupid. Bottom line, right? So you're going to try and pick apart anything they can. And I think it's also, you always see this when you do present at meetups. There's always that one person who wants to make themselves look really smart by asking just the dumbest questions, but they're insisting on answers on this. I usually just ignore these people after about the first question. It's not worth my time, but you can't do that at work, unfortunately. So, but this is an interesting one. The way I deal with this is, I think it really depends who it is, but I tend to ask, okay, so like, why is this important to you? And just get this, or how would you have done this differently? But then you run the risk of like basically being in a meeting and wasting everybody else's time. So have you guys seen this before?
I mean, it's so political, right? Definitely. Definitely.
It's a curveball. It's not just a curveball. You're just like, hey, look over here because I don't like what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
What would be great is you go to Elation and show them all of the lineage that's gone back to where they got the data from. The calculations that's in your business catalog that gave the calculations for it, and then the metadata that maybe come from your visualization tool. Here you go, knock your socks out.
Let me ask you guys, what do you think of the idea of this new role that's emerged called Chief Algorithms Officer? And so the way I understand it, traditional CTO, they kind of come from your technical organization, they rise up into the company, and they're running the technical organization. But of course, they tend to be, software developers, architects, don't necessarily know stats. And the way I understand the CAO role, the idea is that it's usually someone who used to be a machine learning engineer, used to be a statistician. Do you think that's beneficial to companies to have someone in a C-level position who's been down in the trenches working with data, who really gets data? I mean, they could really bike shed and just harass the people presenting data, but they could also understand that data pretty well.
If your core part of your product, like for example, Uber or Deliveroo or anyone like that, where your your IP, your value, your special sauce, or I like to refer it as, is that. Yeah, you need one. You need one to make sure that you've got a vision for that. You've got you're looking at your competitors. You need to make sure you've got your speed to react to changing their algorithms to the marketplace. All of that needs someone that you don't need a C-suite that's just got a good technology understanding but doesn't understand that piece. You need someone that's got that battle scars from that area. That is able to steer you in the right way and give you that competitive edge. If you're a business that a different sort of industry in the retail industry, or maybe a large retail, maybe, but other ones that manufacturing or something, probably not. It's not a key component of it. It could probably be absorbed into one of the other roles. But if you're one of those top Silicon Valley, it's all about the algo, then I think you do.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If you're running like a bodega or like a cattle ranch, you probably don't need a algorithms officer, but if it's core to your mission, like Coach Chris said, you totally need one. But I would say if it's core to C-level should be core, based on titles should be core to, if they're core to your business, and you should have a C-level title for it. So I don't know what that could be, though. It depends on the company. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, we keep seeing new like chief data something or other related titles popping up all the time now. So curious where it's going to go.
Chief data storyteller. That's it.
Chief data storyteller. I mean, depending where you are, you might need that. So,
if you're hiring, Chris might be looking for.
But Chris is only operating at he's a mid to senior level data storyteller right now.
Exactly.
A data storyteller number level 2. So
yeah, exactly. I'm taking it as far as I can. I need to be someone's Padawan. I'd like to learn the arts of proper storytelling without lying or manipulating. Well, I'd probably like to learn that as well. Actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, if it's storytelling, I mean, you're inherently trying to manipulate something about a person's mindset or emotion, right?
I think it's a good idea like mine. So that's not real manipulation because it's for the right purpose.
You can go work at an open Strant mod. I think that was that a company in Wolf of Wall Street. So.
If you're a Padawan, you have to use your Jedi mind tricks, right? So that's part of the training.
Yeah.
But honestly, some of the best storytelling books I've read are not the data storytelling books. For storytelling, I think How to Win Friends and Influence People, still one of the best books I've read. Because I'm talking just about, we talked earlier about sales and marketing, right? And I think at the essence, that's the essence of what we're trying to get across, right? You're trying to sell an idea. And How to Win Friends and Influence People is great. Never Split the Difference. Highly recommend that book as always. And there's lots of others, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, what you're really trying to do is market an idea, sell an idea, and sales is hard. That's the trick. And the danger, especially for people like us who are engineers and architects, is we get super technical, super fast, because that's our default, which is exactly the opposite way you should be doing it, even when you're talking to fellow engineers and architects. Because what happens then is exactly what we're just talking about with the visualization, where people try and one-up you in the technical area, and those conversations go nowhere, right? You got to get people on board with the idea and the mission of what you're trying to do.
Exactly. They're trying to acronym you. I know more 3-letter acronyms than you. I'm going to fire some more at you.
Yeah.
You could be our chief acronyms officer.
Oh yeah, that would be all right. I like that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I think I'm glad that storytelling is becoming more and more of a thing. Although it always has been, I would say, even Edward Tuff's book, visualizing data and whatnot. I have the book over there. I can't remember the title offhand, but even that was like a really good book on just how to visually tell stories with data. So anyway, if the audience has questions, glad to take them. Otherwise, we'll just keep rambling about storytelling or acronyms or whatever. So,
but there was some great questions from. I didn't see who it was now. Who was it? It's from Pierre. So yeah, thanks for the questions, Pierre.
Yeah, and he said too, like this, back to this original question here, where people were distrustful of the preparation steps. He says that they started doubting right at the beginning of the meeting because generally they're decision makers that have made decisions all their life without being backed by data. I mean, we see this a ton, actually. see that's sort of the
they're
default.
probably used to Excel reports being given to you out of download, and hold on, rather than being a nice, maybe a ThoughtSpot visualization that's gone through, and it's just going through directly to Snowflake, and it's just or whatever underlying technology there, and you've got it. Well, look, it's not a snapshot. This is now. This is real life. This is. If someone go off topic slightly, but I was talking to someone who was traveling on the train the other day, and they saw someone bring out a Rolodex. Like they got sat down, bought out this old beaten up computer, and then get a Rolodex. Yeah, and then the file effects may have come out as well.
Crazy.
Some people need to get the new era.
Was it like a hipster or something, or like?
No. I was thinking that they weren't as old as they should have been for that sort of kit. So, maybe it's making a comeback. So I don't know.
Did they have a Polaroid camera? Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe there was something about the Privacy Act's gone mental. It's like they're not going to GDPR me. No worries. I've got it locked away, triple in my little. My Rolodex, they'll never find it.
You should start taking pictures from far away, like telephoto pictures of the Rolodex.
I've got half the telephone number.
But I just recently read a really good book, The Tyranny of Metrics. I put a little clip of it up on LinkedIn the other day, and people like the quote I had. But I think the danger is, though, with data, not everything is a data, kind of back to this one. I don't think all decisions are data-driven decisions, which is kind of weird for a data guy to say. But there's a lot of things where I think you do need to rely on your gut, and times of uncertainty, especially where there's not a lot of context that data can provide, you need to rely on your experience. So, I think more data gives you false assurance that you're going to make a good decision, actually. So,
well, and also common sense around data, right? So one example I have is that with things like Agile and Kanban, for example, we have tried to attach some metrics. Great, KPIs, it's a good thing. But I've also been in meetings where someone's like, well, why has our velocity slowed down so much this week? Because we didn't finish as many story points. It's like, well, why don't we go through the individual tasks and talk about why it slowed down? I could tell you why every one of those got blocked, or half of them got blocked. It's not like some magical thing that our velocity slowed down.
No, you did it on purpose. Okay.
Right. We did it on purpose. We were just out partying the entire week.
Yeah, we just forgot. We're stupid. You should fire us all. No, I mean, it goes into, basically metrics can be used, I think, for good and for bad, right? And unintended consequences of the use of metrics is a huge theme of the Tyranny of Metrics, the book I just read. So, like university admissions, for example, is a good example, and school scores and police metrics and all kinds of stuff. Like you start creating really weird behaviors as soon as you misuse metrics. I think the intention's good, but I think there's a tendency to try and apply scientific methods, especially to business where they have no business being used. So you see this a lot with MBAs, especially, where I think that the approach back in the day was like, learn how to lead, all these other things, and soft skills. And it became hard skills because people felt, well, if we can measure it in a spreadsheet, then it must be great. And let's just start running our business entirely off of numbers, which is great, except when it starts introducing and incentivizing behaviors that run contrary. It's Goddard's law, right? So as soon as you introduce a metric, people are going to start gaming it. That's how it is every time.
Same with KPIs as well. You set those things up. People say, how can I achieve the KPIs rather than keeping your eye off how do I achieve what's best for me or the business or my department or anything. We touched on that before. When KPIs go toxic in a previous one, but that's critical as well.
One I've seen is that you have these different online marketing teams within a company. So you might have your organic team, your paid search, paid ads, paid search terms team, and they end up competing with each other internally, except that they're actually just spending more money for no good reason, or spending more resources for no good reason, because they're just like stepping on each other on these ad spaces.
They should probably be like not competing with themselves or bidding against themselves, really.
Yeah, it's like we say every single talk I almost give. It's show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. That's the universal law of just everything. Guy, on a different note, Guy Thompson asked, he saw the post by Ken G. What's up, Ken? About the differences between data engineering and ML ops today. Thoughts? I haven't actually read the post itself. I did help Ken with his MLOps article, so I can shed some light on that. But I think more broadly, like, what do you guys think the difference is between data engineering and MLOps?
So, well, we've discussed this quite a bit about the different parts of the pipeline and the different skills needed for them. So, and yeah, I think we've even coined on another one. We were talking about, there's XOps now. XOps being covering the different bits of it. You've got your ingest ops or your DevOps right at the beginning of it, your data ops, and you've got the bit doing your pipeline ops, and then you've got your ML ops at the end, or maybe your pipelines combined with your ingest one. But they're different skill sets for different pieces. So that ingest, they do need that infrastructure, they do need that automation tools, all of that. The guys, the next bit doing the transformation, they're a data engineer they just understand do DBT or something to transform it, and they know SQL very well. Great for that. And they may need to work out how they deploy those pipelines and associated ops with it. But then as soon as you get to the next part, is you can't expect both or either of those other engineers that are supporting it to support the regression testing of your algorithms, the looking for any drift that may have created in the data sets that are being used, make sure it's accurate. There are different skills and different steps you need to get that proof to live. So you've got that SDLC process of getting your pipeline done, but it's a different SDLC process for your machine ops, your machine ML ops deployment piece, and how those two things fit together need different skills from what I've seen.
Let me add here. Would it make more sense to talk about data engineering versus ML engineering? Or
yeah, because I think the ML ops. Yeah, I think that's better, because I think ML ops and ML engineering is they're sort of conjoined twins in a way now. But I think it's unfortunate, because when you talk to ML ops people, half the time it sounds like it's an engineering conversation and not an ops conversation. We define ops as basically having three big characteristics, right? You have automation, you have observability and monitoring, and then you have incident response, right? And I think those three components make up DevOps, as a consequence data ops, as a consequence ML ops. And data ops also undercuts data engineering. And we call it one of the undercurrents of data engineering. So you can't escape data engineering without doing data ops.
Yeah,
you do that at your own peril.
Yeah.
So, but ML engineering is an interesting one. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, Chris, I think that was kind of what you were alluding to. I think you were addressing data engineering and ML engineering to a significant degree, with the ops bit thrown in there too.
Yeah. And I think, yes, exactly. And I think the ops part, probably there's more specialist skills than probably the end part of the ML ops parts than maybe there are in the other parts of that pipeline.
But I would say that the big buzzword, amongst all these things right now is just observability, right? We've been doing our Monday morning data chats about observability, and that tends to be I think getting front and center focus, both with data ops and with ML ops right now, and I think rightfully so. It's like,
so do you think they're going to call it data obs? Is that going to be the new thing, rather than is that going to be the new coin term? So it's like abbreviated.
Probably. Who knows? I actually think, when you look at what ML ops does and data ops does, they're not that dissimilar from each other. There's obviously some nuances, but they're very subtle. At the end of the day, you're trying to, detect anomalies, outages and so forth, right? Data quality issues, drift, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I honestly think, and some people dispute me on this, and that's fine, I think data engineering and ML engineering and data ops and ML ops are actually going to become more and more combined.
Yeah.
If you look at what they're doing, the differences are subtle. And I think they're subtle enough they do deserve, kind of their own terms. But for all practical purposes, that you're using basically the same sorts of tools.
Yeah, it's a Venn diagram, right? Like you have this big overlap space. And maybe, we talked about the stages of the data engineering lifecycle. Maybe if you're ML engineering, you don't really worry as much about ingest. You kind of let the data engineers handle that. Then the in-between stuff, the transformation, the storage, the serving, all that is a big zone of overlap. And then like the serving part kind of expands out in the ML ops world. Now I'm worrying about, GPUs and ML training infrastructure and model monitoring. The other comment I'd make is that like data ops has kind of been around for a long time without the term. So in other words, ETL developers have been worrying about data ops type things for the last 30 years or so. except the big shift is that we're now doing more statistical monitoring, not just like simple null monitoring, business logic monitoring. There's finally this realization that like you have to worry about statistical anomalies in your data, whether you're doing data ops or ML ops. It's kind of the same problem.
Which linked into that observatory, because if you collect all that, you need to observe it somewhere. Need to have the ability to view it and collaborate on it, create a story about it, tell the story.
Sorry, my camera keeps breaking. So it must be me. I just break the camera. So
you're just too good looking, Joe. That's the problem. So you're breaking the camera.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I'm curious to see where this all goes, but like data engineering, again, I think it helps to think about things in terms of life cycles, as you point out, Matt, where it's data engineering life cycle basically gets data from source systems, does something, and provides it downstream to data scientists and analysts. ML engineering basically takes that data set and uses it in the ML life cycle. And they all have their own kind of distinct parts for sure. But I would say from a tooling aspect, I could see a lot of these companies, a lot of them do borrow from each other, frankly.
I mean, I think we can just call it out, right? Like we talked about Y Labs this week in the Monday morning data chat, and they frame themselves as being on the ML side, but we were looking at their product and we're like, well, this would work great for like data warehouse monitoring, just monitoring statistical data quality.
Mm-hmm. It totally would. So, but yeah. And I guess, what are your predictions in the next, kind of bring back to storytelling and stuff? Like, do you have any predictions for data storytelling over the next few years, or?
So I think having some recognized frameworks or something that can help with that storytelling, which I think Dharma have done a lot of that anyway. So I mean, but Dharma's it's deep, so and it's not needed for everything. So I think there's a something that can help companies internally tell their story. You know, we talked before about getting support or getting the funding for foundations, and how difficult that is. I think if you're able to have a measurable way of demonstrating why you need those foundations and the benefits they give in an easier way, then I think that would be a good thing. But I've got a good template now. I think it's the other thing is education. I mean, all the things you pointed out, those books, those references, things we've seen, the obvious tricks that people play when doing it, not giving proper context. These people are using spreadsheets up until now that have no factual backup. I think the quicker we can remove that and provide lineage to where our data, we provide kite marking to the quality of that data, and we can focus on actually reacting to the data rather than talking about how it got there.
Makes a lot of sense. Any thoughts, Matt?
I think that's a pretty good summary as things as they stand. What are your thoughts on this one?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of think that, the evolution is really going to be data storytelling is really only as effective as the audience to which you're telling a story.
Yeah. And
so I think if the audience can become more data literate, I think the impact of data storytelling is, going to be greater. If you try to, I can data storytell all day to my dog. She's not going to care. She'll just look at me kind of blank, like blink her eyes and, wag her tail. And that's how I kind of feel sometimes when I talk to audiences about data, right? Either the context isn't there, the appreciation isn't there. And so I think first, you got to get the people, people who you're going to be talking to, your audience, right? I think that's what I want to see being impacted is just greater data literacy. So I think if you can knock that out, all things help, kind of solve from there, including, our jobs, as more of the engineering and architecture side. But if you don't have great data literacy, the systems we build don't have the impact they need to. Data storytelling, it's, more like data tall tales, actually, not storytelling. It just kind of falls in deaf ears. And so, somebody said a metaverse for storytelling in each company. Yeah, totally. And let Facebook run that metaverse too. That's a great idea.
That's right.
They're super.
Exactly. They're great with data.
They're too good with data. Yeah, that's interesting. I was actually looking at getting a VR headset for my kid, but I'm like, I really don't want them getting onto Oculus for a lot of reasons.
Did you see that John Carmack hacked older Oculus devices?
Yeah,
That's cool. If they're not made anymore, you can probably buy one on eBay for a bunch of money now. But he hacked them so that you can run your own kernel on them, and they're not controlled by Facebook anymore.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I got friends that work at Facebook, but I'm not particularly a fan of the company or what they do. So it is what it is. But yeah, I would. Yeah. Anyway, the metaverse. We'll talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, I came across that notion back in '92 when Snow Crash came out, the book, which is about the funny thing about the metaverse is an aside. It's about a dystopian future where, like, post financial collapse, post economic collapse, and people are like living in storage units, and they just jack into the virtual reality world called the metaverse, and it's not too different from like a Ready Player One, except that it's written back in the '90s, which is cool because people are still using cassettes for everything because they thought people were going to be using tapes for everything. So anyway, I always find watching old science fiction interesting too, just for the reason that they kind of co-opt the technology of that time period and extrapolate that to the future, not thinking that things would be like wireless or something. Blade Runner does a good job at this, so I think they still use cassettes. And Blade Runner, even though it's supposed to take place in like 2019.
Well, it's like Star Wars tech, right? It's all these like tape cassettes and such that are being passed around with secret data on them.
And like lights that like blink for no apparent reason.
Mechanical you plug in with the mechanical system to communicate.
Yeah, you need a blinking catalog that tells you the order and what the blinks is to what it means. It's there.
Awesome. Well, cool. I think it's a good place to wrap up. We'll have to do this again in a couple of weeks. And if we end up meeting up when you're in the States, Chris, we'll have to do a live show. So
yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think our dates is still all planned anyway. Just haven't booked it yet.
Awesome. Well, thanks to the audience for bearing with us. We definitely felt like we were treading on thin ice here, going to the data storytelling land. But
very dangerous.
It's very dangerous. So, yeah, all the data storytellers are going to be out there like
they can write a story.
They can write a story about it and tell it to us.
We'll be the judge of that story.
It's very political, so yeah, like all storytelling.
No, but I think it's a good thing for data engineers and architects to know about, right? I think that it's not, but data visualization isn't just a BI thing. It's not just a reporting thing or whatever. I think the more we can appreciate how to tell stories with data and just tell stories in general, the better off we are. So as long as the stories are useful, there's a lot of like kind of BS stories out there I think people don't need to talk about, but anyway.
And again, architecture and engineering stories, like, communicate what you're actually doing, but not with all the VPCs and the zones and such.
It's a bit too much for some audiences.
Right.
It's a bit too much for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Right.
All right.
Until next time.
Have a great week.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye-bye. See ya.
Take care.